Welcome to today's Half Hour With. I'm your host today, Pete Hammond, and we have a very special half hour with the new documentary, Not Going Quietly. And it is an extraordinary film. It's one you must see. And when you see it, you may look at the subject matter here and go like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can take it, but I'm telling you, you can really, this is a four-quadrant movie, as they say in the business. It's something everyone will appreciate. And we're going to talk about it today. Very excited to have with us the film's director, Nicholas Bruckman. Hi, Nick. How are you? Good. He's had quite a resume here. His film, La Americana, you might have seen on Nat Geo and PBS, won many awards at different film festivals and things. He's head of People's Television, which is sort of an activism, filmmaking. They do all kinds of things. And he also did the film Valley of Saints, which won the Sundance Film Festival Audience Award and also was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award. His current film here, as I mentioned, Not Going Quietly, has been nominated for 2 Critics' Choice Association Documentary Awards, including Best Political Documentary. Congratulations on all of this so far, Nick. It's very impressive here, as well as for your executive producer, who needs no introduction from me. You know him from so many things. He's won multiple Emmy Awards, including for The West Wing, Transparent, The Handmaid's Tale. Every time he does a different show, he wins an Emmy. So, so many different great movies too. Bradley Whitford, hi.
Great to see you, Pete. Thanks for having this discussion.
Nick, why don't you start us off and just give me a little bit of a synopsis of what this film is about before I show them a bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. Thanks for having me, and thanks for being here, Bradley, and for all your support. Not Going Quietly is the story of activist Adi Barkan, called by Politico magazine as the most powerful activist in America. Adi's story begins as a young father in Santa Barbara with a beautiful young boy of just a few months old and a wife who's a professor at UC Santa Barbara. He has a long career as an activist and his whole life ahead of him when he is suddenly and inexplicably struck in with ALS. He is in a state of despair. And then, to add insult to injury, Donald Trump is elected president, wiping out the decade of political organizing work that he had dedicated his life to. And with nowhere to turn, he decides to get on a plane to DC to protest Trump's tax bill, which will cut into healthcare and Medicare and Medicaid. And he sort of strikes out. He goes there. He's in a wheelchair at this time. And he thinks, well, you know, maybe my best days are behind me. And on the plane home, he runs into Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona. And he walks up to the senator, films their interaction, and says, "Be a hero, vote no on this tax cut." The video of this interaction goes viral before the plane even lands, and Adi becomes the face of the US healthcare fight that's happening and still raging today in America. And along with a merry band of activists, Adi in a wheelchair accessible RV, barnstorm across the country, fighting to win healthcare for all, defeat the Republican Congress, and ultimately end the Trump administration, and succeeds at all 3. And that's the story of Not Going Quietly, of course, as he reckons with this disease and how to be the best father he can in light of his paralysis from ALS.
And his movement, Be a Hero. Certainly he is a hero. There's no question about it. Let's take a look at the actual film and meet him here.
Now, I want to have a chance to tell the story about my friend, Adi Barkan.
He's been an activist and an organizer all of his life.
With us today is Adi Barkan. I can't do Adi's story justice. I will let him tell it.
After Carl was born, we felt like we had reached the mountaintop.
Say hi.
And then, out of the clear blue sky, we were struck by lightning.
I was diagnosed with ALS today.
The knowledge that I was dying was terrible. But dealing with my insurance company was even worse. I wanted to spend every moment I had left with Rachel and Carl. But then Congress came after our health care. I couldn't stay quiet any longer.
My next guest made headlines when he confronted a Republican senator on an airplane.
This is your moment to be an American hero. All right, ready to rumble.
We decided to start a movement.
to urge people to stand up, confront the elected officials. All right, I'm gonna knock on your door.
Did you just get out of jail? Are you gonna keep protesting on Monday?
Yeah.
What do we want? Healthcare!
I am willing to give my last breath to save our democracy. What are you willing to give?
Liz, I'm having trouble breathing.
I just think we have to stop.
Our time on this earth is the most precious resource we have.
Carl, I love you so much. Movement building allows me to transcend my body, and that's the beauty of democracy, that together we can be more than our individual selves.
The paradox of my situation is, the weaker I get, the louder I become.
Well, there's so many things to talk about here. I think it's interesting. You describe yourself, what you do in filmmaking is part journalism, part activism, part art, part action. It's a different approach than many different filmmakers. Do you want to explain that and how it wound up leading you to doing this?
Yeah, happy to, Pete. Thank you. I came to filmmaking not through activism. As a kid, I always wanted to, as any kid growing up in the 90s, making films with a VHS camera, wanted to be Quentin Tarantino, wanted to be Spike Jonze, make music videos, make TV, make action films and sci-fi movies. And then when I was around 17, 9/11 happened, and I was here in Manhattan with my camera, as I always was, down there filming, seeing what I could do to help. And in the subsequent years of all of the trauma of the Bush administration, which we relived, I saw all of the division and terror of the war on terror that we perpetrated on the rest of the world and on ourselves, and felt that I really wanted to dedicate my filmmaking towards bridging those kinds of divides. I think that documentary film is one of the best empathy engines for bringing people together, for eliminating xenophobia, for making people care about and protect each other and work together and mobilize and activate, and all the things that we later see Adi do and Not Going Quietly. Michael Moore once said, when I was a kid in a documentary film program, I remember him saying that somebody came up at a Q&A, I think it was of Fahrenheit 9/11, and said, "But Michael, aren't you just preaching to the choir?" And he said, "Of course I am. That's how you get them to sing." And that quote always stayed with me, that, we're not necessarily trying to get people to believe in Medicare for all, really get people to believe in their own power to make change and take that action. And so I run a film production company that does that kind of brand work. I do kind of social issue storytelling for companies, for political campaigns. We worked on ads for Joe Biden last year. And in early 2018, I got a call from a woman named Liz Jaff, who you'll see in this trailer. And she said, "I just met this guy in an airplane. It's a crazy story. He talked to this politician, but we're going to launch a healthcare organization." And I thought, okay, well, this sounds interesting, sort of like a nonprofit fundraiser. It sounded sort of sad and like, oh, he's got ALS and he wants people to give money to. And of course, I flew out to Santa Barbara to meet Adi for what I thought would be this short commercial. And I just encountered the funniest, most resilient, most graceful person. It had actually been almost 9 years since I directed a feature documentary. I'd worked in narratives and other commercial work since then, because it really took that long to find somebody that I wanted to spend this much time, that I wanted to dedicate my life to sharing their story with the world. And in Adi's case, there really wasn't much time, because he was already losing his voice. He'd already been diagnosed for a year. There's this long courtship process of sharing your vision and trying to get them on board and, navigating the rules of the road. And in this case, at the end of that first interview with Adi, I said, "Hey, Adi, can we record a Kickstarter fundraiser for a movie I want to make about you someday?" Because if we didn't do it then, he might not have been able to just a few months later. And so there was this real deep sense of urgency to making sure the world knew who Adi was. And from Adi's perspective, there was this urgency that he felt to letting his kids know who he was and to capturing this time in his life. And so we kind of came together from the personal and the political and this sort of shared vision to bring him to the world. And I'm really grateful to you and to Bradley, who came in shortly thereafter and helped us realize that vision.
Yeah, Bradley, how did you get involved? What was your connection to this particular story?
I had known of Adi in the sort of progressive circles, and I met him in a Starbucks across from Senator Feinstein's office. It was progressive love at first sight. He was the definition of a happy warrior. He had difficulty speaking, but he was incredibly funny. I knew how effective he was. I had no idea how funny he was. We saw some counter protesters, some of whom had some Nazi paraphernalia, and Adi immediately said, "Put me in the wheelchair, get him to punch the guy with ALS. It'll be great publicity." Soon after, I heard that Nick and Amanda Roddy, the producer, were that there was film of him in progress, and I just said, whatever I can do, if I can help financially, if I can get it to people. I went to the Duplass brothers, who are like siblings of mine. They're wonderful. I refer to them as sort of middle school football coaches in terms of storytelling. It's all fundamentals. Where are you? Where are you going? I knew with Amanda and Nick, I could feel their passion and urgency to get this right. I have to believe that we don't just get a democracy. We have to make it every day. I have to believe that disappointing elections are not periods, they're commas. I have to believe that action is the antidote to despair. There are very few human beings who can go through such incredible suffering and somehow transcend it by attempting to alleviate that suffering for others. They build religions around people like that. Yet at the same time, Adi is doing this not so you can see what a hero he is, but that we all have this capacity. And Adi is very effective. This is not about a sad guy with ALS holding a sign. This is the most effective progressive activist. Ask Nancy Pelosi, ask anybody. And he, at this moment, is embodying this disease. Is not defining him, it is revealing him. And he sees the opportunity. It is completely insane that we don't have access to healthcare. And he saw this opportunity to embody that. I was just absolutely thrilled. Nicholas and Amanda made just such a beautiful, beautiful movie that is so surprisingly fun and inspiring. I was just thrilled to be able to be a part of it.
It's amazing. And when you mention the Duplass brothers, Mark and Jay, the kings of indie cinema and everything that they do, there's also such an impressive list of executive producers that just roll by on the screen. I noticed a few just watching it. Nina Tassler, of course, from CBS, and Denise Denovi and Sam Bisbee and Joan Bornstein, on and on. I mean, you really
anybody who met Adi or saw some of this footage was like, oh my God, we need to get this story out there.
That really shows that too. And Nick, I mentioned some of the accolades it's gotten and awards attention it's gotten, and one was, best political documentary. So when you see something like this and you think, oh, we're going to just see kind of a medical thing here. This is as political a documentary as I've seen this year, one that really does light the fire try to light the fire under people in that way, and against Congress and Washington and everything else.
Yeah, that was the goal. I mean, we joked around a bit when development saying this movie could be called "What's Your Excuse?" Because if Adi can do it, I mean, you watch this film and you can't be jaded. You spend time with Adi and you can't feel hopeless. I mean, not just politically, but for yourself, for your health, for your family, for what you have. You feel a deep sense of both gratitude and urgency to do something. And I wanted to translate that with this film. But of course, you know, I wanted to make a film that was actually entertaining. I wanted to make something that had a driving narrative quality. And it was really when Adi called and said that he was taking this show on the road. He said, "Hey, remember that thing I did to Jeff Flake on the plane where I confronted him in public and shamed him with my story? Well, we're going to do that all over the country in an RV with a bunch of young activists. We're going to train other people, find them, arm them with cell phones and social media, to find politicians at their homes or offices or wherever, and shame them for the lies they tell and make people aware, and then primary them out so we can win healthcare." I said, "Okay, I'm in, I'm all in." And we got a separate RV and we had a production team following for 5 weeks, a sweaty crew of filmmakers, Amanda, myself, the DP and our editor, driving along with them. And one thing about the film that I, really want to convey for folks who haven't seen it yet is that you see, Adi is this saint-like figure that Bradley described, right? With people building religions around him. And yet he curses like a sailor. He tells dirty jokes. He is a huge pothead, which you only see a little bit of the film. But trying to kind of deconstruct all of that, hagiography and show this real man is what kind of makes the film ultimately more inspiring. And it also makes the film a fun buddy road movie with this guy on his last road trip, but with his best friends, fighting for justice during the day and smoking joints and eating s'mores at night, like we all can relate to on our, in our lives. And I think that is something that I want the film to show, that activism is not just that holding a sign and being angry thing. It's actually a communal, joyous experience that brings you closer to people that you love and also that you can win, which Adi does in this movie.
Yeah, it is. One thing about Adi, again, he is an incredibly effective organizer. The House was flipped because healthcare was put at the center of that election, the whole idea of taking away access to healthcare. And I believe that a lot of that was due to Adi. And again, so does Nancy Pelosi.
Now, this is all a perfect intro to another clip that we have here with him talking about what he's doing and what he wants Congress to do in front of a congressional committee here. So let's take a look at this scene from Not Going Quietly.
Although my story is tragic, it is not unique. In many ways, it is not so rare. Every family is eventually confronted with serious illness or accidents. On the day we are born and on the day we die, and on so many days in between, all of us need medical care. And yet in this country, the wealthiest in the history of human civilization, we do not have an effective or fair or rational system for delivering that care. Our time on this earth is the most precious resource we have. A Medicare for all system will mean more time giving high-quality care. And for patients and our families, it will mean more time doing the things we love, together. And so my closing message is not for the members of this committee. It is for the American people. Join us in this struggle. Be a hero for your family, your communities, your country. Come give your passion and your energy and your precious time to this movement. It is a battle worth winning. For my son Carl, for your children, and for our children's children.
Yeah, what I love about that and the filmmaking there is that you're focusing on the faces of those who are being affected by the word. So we just hear the narration essentially over that. When you could have just done a congressional committee can be really dry and somebody just sitting there. And I just thought that was so effectively done and so emotional to get the point across here.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of the things about that moment that allowed that to work was that us, along with Liz and with Adi's help, demanded that everybody in the congressional committee agreed to us being there. And so myself and our other cinematographer were literally walking behind all of the Congress people, which you normally can't do, so that we could get those reaction shots. And I think what I really wanted to do with the film is make sure people knew that ultimately this is not about Adi. It's about the impact that he has on other people. This idea of be a hero. It's not that Adi is a hero, it's that everybody can be a hero. And if it's somebody with ALS can do it, so can you. And so seeing the way that Adi moved people and just transform them the way he did to me personally is what I wanted to convey with that type of the type of editing and cinematography.
Yeah, it's a big thing about Adi is you know, he doesn't want to be perceived it struck me just listening to that testimony again, which I've seen a bunch. It is the antidote to I alone can fix it. He does not want this to be the story of a man suffering and he is constantly reminding us that we don't just get a democracy, we make one every day. And I think about in this political moment, young people understandably cynical about where we are and dipping into despair. And you want to remind them of what our civil rights leaders were up against, of what Nelson Mandela was up against. And the progress can be made, and Adi embodies that you know, these obstacles again don't have to define us, but that, you know, can reveal us, and we can make real progress in a democracy, as frustrating as it is.
And frustrating is the word, because you watch, as I do, like MSNBC all day long, or any kind of news coverage, and it's always focused on, you know, particularly all these battles to get these bills done, how much it's cost. It's the numbers. And that's the message that you're seeing from the media. So this kind of a film getting out there focuses on the human being. And
Yes.
that is so rare that we see, you know, with all this assault that we have on our senses constantly. And
Well, Nick has made the point, and I'm going to jump in and say it in case he doesn't. But this film obliterates the separation between the political and the personal. It's very important to do that. And it is, again, completely insane that we don't have access to healthcare in this country.
Oh, totally. Now you mentioned 5 weeks in a van and going and shooting all this stuff. What's the ratio of what you actually shot and the archival footage that you had to acquire here?
I mean, we shot a few hundred hours because the film tracks about 3 years in Adi's life. And, you know, speaking of all those news stories, one of the challenges we had was that Adi just kept making the news. I mean, we never could have imagined when we first started this that we'd be in the room with Kamala Harris shooting, or with Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, all seeking Adi out for his stamp of approval because of his power and influence over the progressive community. But we also had to be careful not to always chase those news stories and really make sure that the film worked as a linear narrative film. And that's something that was, I think, a bit of a challenge in the edit. But what works so well, and it speaks to what Bradley was saying, that I was saying about the film eliminating the personal and political boundary, is that I think the reason Adi agreed to the level of intimacy that you see in the film is because he had a decade before the movie really begins of using storytelling as a political organizing tool. He understood how to talk to Jeff Flake in that moment, to bare his soul, to use his son as the motivator to be a hero and vote no on that tax cut. And so when I asked Adi to, you know, come into his life, to go into the shower with him, to be there at his doctor's appointments, to see him crying and breaking down in despair, I think he knew that that would ultimately be a politically effective tool. And so that's what I think is important, that I want people to understand about the film, is that stories have power. Your personal story has power, whether it's extreme like Adi's, or whether it's other loss or other difficulties that people may not feel that they're empowered or they know enough to talk about politics, but everybody's an expert on their lived experience. If you've had, this is something that Tracy, one of the activists in the film, says, if you've dealt with the healthcare system yourself or experienced prejudice, you're an expert on that. And if you use the tools given to you, you can change the world. And so as a documentary filmmaker, I'm doing that in 90 minutes. But you can do that on social media. You can do that with your cell phone. And that's what Adi's doing, is really, he lost his own voice and yet has given it to so many people. And it's just a story that nobody could have written this. It's just stranger than fiction.
And one thing is the line you don't want to cross between this and exploitation. And you must have had that in your head too, about how far and what kind of access he's going to give me and what I need to show the story, but not cross into something personal for him or his family and those kind of considerations.
When Liz Jaff, does not pause a nanosecond when the reporter says, are you using this man's illness to make a political point? She says, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. I just love that. But Nick,
yeah, that's all I wanted to say is that it was strategy and yeah, Adi wanted to turn this into something meaningful. He wanted to make this awful, meaningless thing into a weapon to shape our democracy and make a better world for his son, and he succeeds at doing that. So was he exploiting it? Yes. Were we doing it with the film? Hell yeah. That's that attitude that Liz has in that scene that Bradley pointed out, I think embraces that point.
I just want people to know how much fun he is.
Oh, totally. And it's impressive too, beyond him and other things that are weaved in here, Anna Maria, her story as well, which, tonally and working all that in too. How did you approach that?
Yeah, that's a very pivotal scene in the movie when Anna Maria Archila, who's one of Adi's close friends and colleagues during the Kavanaugh protests, confronts Senator Flake again in an elevator about her own sexual assault.
That's such a famous thing, and this gives such unique context to that now.
Yeah, and Adi and Anna Maria Archila had known each other for many years, and of course, everybody in America knew that moment. It was on the front page of every newspaper, and it speaks to how this tactic and this movie and this thing about stories mattering and Washington being able to listen and bend to your will if you force it to is not just about healthcare. It stretches across so many issues. And it's not just about Adi, it's about him passing that torch to Anna Maria and to the other women activists in that scene. And she's an incredible organizer herself, who's been a big part of our campaign and release of the film, and I'm excited to have some upcoming screenings with her as well. But it speaks to the bigger point that we can be heroes, not just about healthcare, but about the most difficult and painful things that have happened to us have this intrinsic power to heal ourselves, to heal others, as both Adi and Anna Maria do.
But one of the reasons we have minority rule in this country, 60%, at least 60% of this country wants universal access to healthcare, wants to deal with a climate crisis, wants to deal with racial and economic inequities. But one of the reasons is, and this is what I love about Adi, the right, the right understands, and I think it's just because they're pursuing a business agenda, that politics is the way you create your moral vision. We think, progressives often think that it's what we do, culture. Culture is very, very important, but I always say will and grace won't help you if you have a pre-existing condition. Politics is the way. We need that follow through, and we need, it's not as fun as making movies. It's hard work. It's relentless work. There aren't award shows for it, but you need to pressure the political system and it will respond. It has to.
That's great. Well, in the less than 1 minute I've got left here in our half hour with it, it's been great. What's the one thing that comes to mind that you want to say that'll make people watch this documentary? Go ahead, Nick.
Sure. Well, I think that the film is more than just about activists. It's more activism. It's more than about healthcare. It's really a story about a man, his relationship with his own body. It's a father-son story, and it's about each of our relationships with our country and each other. And Adi takes the worst that can happen to any of us and makes something amazing and incredible and harmonious come out of it. And it's just a good time.
I just want people to know the joy in this, the joy of Adi is very connected. He has Rachel, his wife, is astonishing. It's about his connection with his family. It's about his connection with his friends and fellow activists. and it's about democracy and what democracy can be. And I think what democracy, the promise of democracy that I think Adi believes in, is that it obliterates, it has the capacity to obliterate the toxic myth of separateness.
Thank you. I want to thank our friends at Greenwich Entertainment who are distributing this film, and you can find it on iTunes and Amazon and all kinds of places, and it's worth checking out. I want to thank our guest, Bradley Whitford, again, and Nicholas Bruckman. Thank you for making this film and for joining us today on Half Hour With. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Bradley.